Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Biotech Capital Compass. This is Hartaj Singh, signing in from Brooklyn, New York, on a cold and a little foggy Thursday here in Brooklyn. This is part two of our series on how biopharma works. We're going to talk about biotech here, as opposed to talking about pharma, Roche specifically in part one. You might have noticed I'm also wearing my blue leather jacket. Because on occasion it's nice to wear these leather jackets because all of our tech brethren, um, um, ladies and gentlemen in the tech world, tend to wear leather paraphernalia, leather jackets often. It'd be really nice in biotech if we got their valuations also. So it's a small homage to our tech cousins, and because we're biotech, not tech, so small homage to them, and then also hope that we get their valuations sooner rather than later. So let's get going on part two. And we call this Vertex, CRISPR, and biotech as an infrastructure system. In part one of this series, we discussed an idea that I think is increasingly important for healthcare investors. Large pharma is fundamentally a cash flow stabilization machine, and biotech is fundamentally an innovation uncertainty machine. And importantly, this was not meant as good versus bad, not at all. It was an attempt to explain why these sectors behave differently as systems. When Roche behaves differently than the XBI, or why multinational pharma companies often trade differently during periods of stress, why biotech volatility can explode during titling cycles, why valuation regimes differ. Because ultimately, share prices are not random. There are markets probability judgments about, or probabilistic judgments about durability, reinvestment, survivability, visibility, and uncertainty. And today, I want to continue that framework through Vertex and CRISPR. But importantly, this is not really a story about two stocks. It's a story about the changing structure of biotechnology itself. So let's talk about the important distinction here. One of the ideas that resonated most with me while working on this series is this. Pharma often reflects healthcare infrastructure, reimbursement durability, global diversification, and capital preservation. Biotech often reflects innovation optimism, liquidity conditions, risk appetite, and the availability of speculative capital. And historically, that distinction has become relatively clear. But increasingly, some large cap biotech companies are becoming hybrid organisms, not classic biotech anymore, not classic pharma either. And I think Vertex may be one of the best examples of this transition. And I call this section, why Vertex matters beyond Vertex. Now, superficially, Vertex can occasionally look pharma-like, large revenues, strong margins, significant cash generation, durable franchise. But beneath that surface, the company still behaves like an innovation uncertainty machine. And keep your mind on this, innovation uncertainty machine. I really like that concept for biotech because that's essentially in many ways what biotech is. And that's because future valuations still depend heavily on the next layer of scientific success, platform durability, and the company's ability to reinvest successfully into new therapeutic architecture. That is biotech behavior. And I think this distinction matters enormously for understanding modern healthcare investing because many investors still think in outdated categories, pharma, biotech, medtech, but increasingly the boundaries are blurring. Vertex represents that blur very well. Now, let's talk about how Casgevy, which is the product that Vertex and their partner CRISPR have launched together. CRISPR originally developed the science behind this, CRISPR editing, and then brought this product into clinical development. Vertex brought it to commercial stage and now is launching it, worldwide. And let's talk about Casgevy. And I'm sorry, Casgevy is the product that Vertex and CRISPR have launched together, but CRISPR originally developed. Many people still think about Casgevy primarily as the first CRISPR therapy, which of course it is. I mean, absolutely. But I increasingly think the more important point here is Casgevy may represent one of the first real examples of programmable medicines being integrated into healthcare systems at commercial scale. That's really what's happening. Other examples of this are analogs, are CAR T in oncology. It's very similar actually, but in fact, I think in some ways gene editing and these programmable medicines are actually even a step above that. And this is a much larger idea. This is not simply a molecule or even a biologic. This is an operational process. Stem cell collection, gene editing, manufacturing, cryogenics logistics, conditioning chemotherapy, reinfusion, long-term monitoring, treatment center coordination. And suddenly, biotechnology starts to look less like traditional drug development and more like a healthcare infrastructure engineering. That is a profound shift. And this is what I then call the infrastructure move. This is a really important concept to understand. The concept of what I call the infrastructure moat. And this is where the idea of the moat changes form. In Roche, the moat, meaning your defense around your business, right? What is the moat around your business processes or your business idea or your business products? In Roche, that moat often looked like diversification, diagnostics, multinational scale, cash flow durability. With Vertex and CRISPR, the moat may increasingly involve authorized treatment centers, manufacturing ecosystems, logistical integration, reimbursement architecture, physical training, and genomic medicine infrastructure. So one is breadth, sort of defensiveness. The other may become depth defensiveness. And this is also just another important idea to understand and sort of process for yourself as you're understanding healthcare, pharma, biotech, and even investing more and more, hopefully, as readers and listeners to the Biotech Capital Compass. So, importantly, this may also explain this concept of the breadth defensiveness versus depth defensiveness. And also explain why biotech companies increasingly command premium valuation frameworks despite significant uncertainty, because the market may not simply be underwriting a product, it may be underwriting an ecosystem. That's really what's important here. We're just building, what the business is doing, what it's signifying, and what that means, from a valuation perspective. So why does this matter for investors? I think this becomes particularly important for sophisticated lay people, because many people still evaluate biotech using relatively simplistic frameworks. Is the drug good? Will it get approved? What are peak sales? But increasingly, those questions may not be sufficient. The next layer may involve operational scalability, manufacturing quality, treatment center density, reimbursement navigation, and the ability to integrate advanced therapies into real-world healthcare systems. So these are, sound like big words and big topics, but if you read our notes, on Roche, on Vertex, CRISPR, Casgevy, on our note on biotech as barometer, pharma as defense, you'll see we're starting to bring all these topics together. We start at the company level, companies we really like, both as companies and investment ideas, but then now we're starting to overlay and interlay concepts that sort of bring these together into the broader healthcare ecosystem, but also we're talking about how the ecosystem is shifting and changing, how the ground is shifting beneath our feet, both from a business perspective and why that's more important for investors. So again, I'll say this again, the next layer may involve operational scalability, manufacturing quality, treatment center density, reimbursement navigation, and the ability to integrate advanced therapies into real-world healthcare systems. In other words, the next biotech winners may not simply be the best scientists, they may also become the best operators. And historically, that has often been more associated with pharma, which again reinforces the idea that some large-cap biotech companies are actually becoming hybrid. So let's talk about the new structure of biotech now. I think this ultimately leads us to this larger point. Biotech may increasingly evolve from frontier science investing. A lot of people I talk to that like to invest but might not know biotech very more, they call it like a lottery ticket. That's like fancy way, a nice way of saying, an easy way of saying frontier science investing. It's a lottery ticket. But really what biotech is, it's frontier healthcare systems investing. And if you're interested in understanding this and getting to know this, it is really, really amazing stuff that's going on. And this is a very different mental framework. It may also explain why valuation regimes are changing, why some biotech companies begin to trade with greater durability, why some become less financing dependent, why infrastructure itself can become strategic, why investors may eventually reward manufacturing scale, operational execution, and ecosystem control. This is not simply about discovery anymore. I mean, increasingly is at the small cap one product company where they have a really exciting, scientific idea they're bringing to the clinic. Yes, absolutely, that'll still be the case. But as we move into a mid to late stage clinical stage company and then commercial companies that partner with larger biotech companies, we're going to be talking a lot more about these concepts that we're talking about here. So there's an important nuance here. Importantly, none of this means biotech suddenly becomes safe. Do not assume that at all. Far from it. Gene editing still carries scientific uncertainty, manufacturing risk, reimbursement risk, and long-term safety questions. And importantly, future technologies could disrupt today's infrastructure. So in vivo editing could eventually reduce the importance of some ex vivo systems. These are fancy words. You can look them up. Not going to spend a lot of time explaining them here. We'll be writing on them more often in the future. Manufacturing may become simpler. Competitive paradigms may evolve. So this is not Vertex has solved biotechnology, not even close. But I do think the company helps illuminate where parts of biotechnology may be heading structurally. Ultimately, I think this series is gradually becoming less about individual stocks, this theory about how biopharma works, and more about how modern healthcare capitalism actually functions, structurally, operationally, financially, physiologically. And Vertex and CRISPR are fascinating not simply because of science, but because they may represent one of the earliest examples of biotechnology evolving into infrastructure. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to continuing this series with all of you. I know you might have heard, either an ambulance or a fire truck in the background here. I live in Brooklyn. That happens from time to time. But just remember, if you're in a club, they will play the ambulance or the fire truck siren. So I would take this with my closing as more to mean, like in a club, excitement about biotechnology, a great tune going, which is biotechnology evolving and hopefully taking us all to another level of understanding and excitement. Take care. Have a good day. I hope the rest of your day goes well wherever you are. Bye-bye.